when he came out and done the whole "Hello, ladies" and done the bit in the middle, he was over. Billy Gunn was really over with the Outlaws at this time. Goldust was kind of doing the whole thing with the Blue Meanie at this time, and you couldn't work out if it was his mum. I think around that time he was calling him Mummy, which was a bit odd, that whole relationship. And then you had the dynamic of Ryan Shamrock into this, which I don't know who she was supposed to be. Was that the dad? I have no idea. And then of course you got Ken Shamrock, world's most dangerous man. It's just like four completely different worlds coming together in all this. But I remember kind of enjoying it at the time. I don't know why, but I was really into these four, and it seemed like a healthy division at the time for that title, like what they were doing there. Okay, some interesting news here coming out March 15th on the Wrestling Observer. Shamrock started screaming at Tito Ortiz at and I believe this happened at an MMA convention. There was a lot of issues, including some who thought Ortiz should have been punished for poor sportsmanship during a match that he'd had. But yeah, Shamrock and him kind of get into some sort of altercation with one another, and it's been banded around that like this would be a dream match, like the old line facing the new line and all the rest of it, and yeah, there's kind of little subtle hints here that maybe Shamrock is not done with UFC, and is he going to get out of his contract when the time is right, even though WWF have some kind of hold over his contract about the fact that they can extend it if they please. So it's an interesting concept what's going on there. Okay, moving in now, we're going to head up to the 22nd of March. Ken Shamrock was given the weekend off at this point for appearing at Max Muscle magazine in both the Arnold Classic at the time, so he was doing some bits for them. Then we have WWF, some news here, and they've already penciled in the at press time the Intercontinental Championship match and Hardcore title could change at WrestleMania. I think this was the whole situation, Matt. You'll remember when I think it was like, now you had Billy Gunn going for the Intercontinental and Road Dogg was in the Hardcore at this time. Like there was Road Dogg, I think it was like Bob Holly and Al Snow. There was kind of like a triangle between those three. And yeah, they were talking about swapping them over, which I think actually, yeah, that was the case in the end anyway. But yeah, very interested. And of course, on the 15th of the 3rd on Raw, Road Dogg won the Intercontinental title from Venus in just over 3 minutes with a DDT. Match basically was one near fall in it, and the crowd was really into it. DX did a celebration in the dressing room where they teased eventual Road Dogg versus Billy Gunn match. Do you remember all that, Matt, happening where they done a quick U-turn and put Road Dogg in the mix instead of Billy Gunn at this point?
Yeah, I do kind of remember that actually. Yeah, and I do remember like back then, like the Intercontinental division was really kind of like a hot potato kind of situation. The title would change hands, and that's kind of like, although that can be damaging in some terms, it also made it kind of one of those divisions that was more must see, because you never knew when the next person would be given that kind of big break. And like they're always quick to remind us that winning the Intercontinental title is kind of a big deal, because it has led to a lot of greater things in the past. And like Road Dogg back then, what a natural choice as well, because I couldn't believe, like when I look back on it now, just how over with the fans he really was. Everybody knew all the words to everything that he said when he come out to that ring, and and just the kind of like charisma the guy had. And when you think about the journey he had in WWE, coming along from the roadie to get into that, I couldn't believe it in the end. I just think it was a great time for him in his career.
Sure. Okay, let's go to the 22nd of March now, and the Blue Meanie calls out Shamrock, Ken Shamrock, but Ryan Shamrock comes out instead. The Blue Meanie starts to spank her, but Ken Shamrock comes out and beats up the Blue Meanie. Goldust come out, and Shamrock got him in the ankle lock, and Blue Meanie hits Ken Shamrock with a chair. This is kind of like the go home show for WrestleMania, and of course the setup now is a fatal 4-way kind of match or a 4-way match between of course Road Dogg, Shamrock, Goldust, and Val Venus. Matt, what did you make of this match? Obviously, I know you checked this out recently, but I remember watching this WrestleMania at the time live. I can still have quite good memories of it, and if there was any WrestleMania that really cemented Attitude, I think it was this one. I think this was like the WrestleMania of the Attitude Era. This just had there were so many twists and turns just on this show. There seemed like there was a big storyline going on. I'm sure we'll get into it on long form at some point about WrestleMania 15. But for this match, Matt, obviously I guess they played it, somewhat safe just by having Road Dogg retain the title. But what did you make of it and the whole dynamic thrown in there again with Ryan Shamrock and how all that ends up for him in this one?
Yeah, I definitely felt like this one did have a lot of twists and turns in, like you were saying. It didn't really pan out the way I was expecting, and I thought like the focus might be like more heavily on Shamrock, but the fact that he became kind of an afterthought by halfway through the match, and that they were leaving us with the Road Dogg in the ring and Goldust, I was thinking, well, okay, this is quite interesting. Then it hasn't gone the way that I thought it would go, but perhaps that's a good thing. And I guess they were throwing in a lot of heavy story-based elements, aren't they? With Shamrock's sister getting involved in some way or another, and back then, even like at a moment like WrestleMania, they were always thinking ahead. Everything was leading on to another thing, because like even after the end of that match, it wasn't over. We still were left with questions, and we still had to tune into Raw to find out like the answer to some of those questions, like what's going to happen next with Goldust and that.
Yeah, I kind of know where you're coming from there. Yeah, I feel like this is a WrestleMania match. We've seen obviously Shamrock last year have that match with The Rock for the Intercontinental Belt. This kind of seems like, okay, he's hopefully, I guess you're hoping that he's going to come out of this and he's going to go push up the card a little bit. But it didn't look like they really positioned him enough that well to showcase Shamrock in this match. And yeah, as Matt said, it did look like they kind of left him out on the outside a little bit. The Raw after this, Shamrock beats Gangrel in 34 seconds with an ankle lock, and they do the whole bloodbath thing. I'm sure everybody remembers that from the Brood. Meltzer reports Shamrock didn't sell it and instead put the ankle lock on Christian, who spilled the beans on where Stephanie was being hidden. Now, I'm sure for those of you that don't remember this is when Undertaker had kind of taken Stephanie hostage, and the whole corporation were trying to find out where she was and who was behind it and all the rest of it. So it seems like Shamrock's doing these matches, but at the same time he's kind of very still heavily involved with the corporation, and now obviously you've got the Ministry there as well. They're another group that have come out with the Undertaker, and you add Stone Cold Steve Austin into the mix as well. There's lots of different things going on, but I think it's what makes the Attitude Era so good is there was just so many different interlockings with each other. It was really cool at that time. One interesting thing here is that Undertaker versus Shamrock is scheduled for Backlash pay-per-view, and that's nothing to be sniffed at, I suppose, at this point. Obviously, Undertaker, Matt, would have just got done with he hung the Big Boss Man at the end of WrestleMania 15. I'm sure you remember that image, Matt, at the time, and
definitely, you could forget that.
Yeah, Shamrock on the Raw after, this is the 12th of the 4th, Shamrock shows up with a baseball bat and beat everyone up but Taker, who then told Shamrock his sister, who I guess was held hostage for this week, was in the boiler room, and so then he goes after her. Then he discovers Viscera's got her, which is Meltzer reports a pretty scary thought. So Ken went off to the boiler room, and there's another sort of ambush going on. So Shamrock is very much heavily involved with the whole ministry at this point, and especially with the Undertaker. I guess this is kind of like a step up, Matt, in terms of where Shamrock to get a match with the Undertaker. I know you could look at it and argue, how come Shamrock didn't get the match with Undertaker at WrestleMania and it was Boss Man? Because I suppose, Matt, they could have easily have gone with Ken Shamrock, but maybe because of the whole Ryan Shamrock thing, that almost, should we say, got in his way, would you think?
Yeah, it did kind of feel like that, didn't it? You kind of had to wrap up those loose ends, otherwise you can all get a bit messy.
Yeah.
Plus, perhaps like they were buying the time and trying to think of a better angle to work Shamrock in, but...
Yeah. Okay, so let's get to WWF Backlash now then. Shamrock and Undertaker, they're going out like semi-main event. So this is kind of a big deal in terms of where it's been positioned. And Undertaker pins Ken Shamrock in a match that goes 18 minutes 50 seconds. Meltzer reports the crowd was actually really dead in this match. This was actually a really great match, but just should have been held at a different place. The story of the match was Shamrock continually made smooth moves into submissions on the leg to keep the Undertaker on the ground. Obviously WWF fans don't know submissions and don't pop for moves that they haven't been sold on television. I get the feeling, Matt, that Shamrock, like his style, like we haven't really spoke about his style that much, but do you get the feeling, Matt, that Shamrock is almost ahead of his time? Like if he was almost like 2 years too early here, because when you think of the Attitude matches, Matt, they weren't kind of doing these submissions that much. They weren't doing all these groundwork. Like we get to see that so much, obviously nowadays. But if you think about the guys that kind of were debuting when Shamrock kind of just phased out, I'm talking about Kurt Angle, Jericho, the Radicals, the likes of Benoit, Dean Malenko, Eddie Guerrero. Like there were too many guys coming in at that point for fans not to kind of get used to that style. Do you feel like Shamrock kind of missed out on all that, and having Shamrock here kind of like makes Shamrock very he's different, but not in a good way. It's not getting him over with the fans at this point.
Yeah, and that's happened with all too many guys, really.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely reminds me of people like Owen Hart when they were coming in doing all their high flying stuff, and it just wasn't really working with the beefier, muscly guys.
Sure.
But just as the way you said about Shamrock, yeah, his technical skills were second to none at that time, I suppose. There wasn't too many people rivaling that, and the way he would just transition into that ankle lock was, just genius sometimes. We would trap the leg and just roll it over. So good to see. But I think, like you said, yeah, there wasn't too many people to bounce off of with that kind of skill at the time, and it was a slower kind of pace and more kind of brawling and powerhouses, which is a real kind of shame because, like you said, a few years later he would have had some truly iconic matches and that would have gone down and probably stood the test of time now, even with the way that if he had a match with Kurt Angle, that could really be a standout in the history books. Yeah,
it seems like that was going to be the match. I think that that people definitely would have wanted to see back then, no doubt about that. Okay, the night after that, Matt, now I'm sure you remember this, we're talking about groups and stuff like that. How about the Union, Matt?
Yeah.
This is not one of my fondest memories. for any of these guys, really. You had Ken Shamrock, The Big Show, Test, and Mankind, which were all